From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. As the Russia-Ukraine conflict enters its fourth year, U.S. and Russian officials are having their second round of talks. This happened after they held their first round of talks in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on February the 18th. Following these developments, Chinese President Xi Jinping had a conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday. And President Putin said that the U.S.-Russia talks would not impact Russia-China partnership. And according to Interfax, quoting Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the second round of U.S.-Russia talks is scheduled in Istanbul today, which is Thursday, in a few hours from now. Meanwhile, Washington and Kyiv are getting closer to a deal, reportedly, over rare earth resources and security arrangements. And President Zelenskyy will go to the White House on Friday, U.S. Eastern Time, to sign a deal potentially and meet with President Donald Trump. Now, is Trump trying to pull a Nixon in reverse with Russia? And how is China navigating its path for a political solution to the Ukraine crisis? Now, to dive deeper into these questions, we're joined by Zhang Xin in Shanghai, Associate Professor from School of Politics and International Relations from East China Normal University. And in Moscow, Russia, I'll be talking to International Relations and Security Analyst Mark Sleboda. Welcome, gentlemen. Mark, let me go to you first in Moscow. Sure. The Russian and American officials are having their second round of talks in Istanbul, reportedly. After their first round of talks, the two sides decided on four principles, including reestablishing taking steps to reestablish their diplomatic relations. What do you expect to come out of their second round of talks in Istanbul?
Yeah, so the first round of talks wasn't actually about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. That's well down the road. The first round was simply reestablishing diplomatic relations, setting up a consultative body to discuss further problems that arise between the two of them so they don't arise to the situation of tensions, and maybe reiterating each other's starting positions on any potential future negotiations over Ukraine. As far as I understand, the second round of talks in Istanbul this weekend will be about restaffing each other's embassies in each other's countries, which as a result of the tensions and on the initiation of the U.S. side reduced each other's embassies down to skeleton crews. So they're still on the topic of what you would call fully restoring diplomatic relations. And I think we have to think in terms of baby steps. Relations have gone down so far that it's going to be a long time. This is going to be a lengthy diplomatic process.
Mark, how does Ukraine play into all this? Zelenskyy reportedly is negotiating with Donald Trump or their teams on a rare earth minerals agreement in exchange for Ukraine's security guarantee from the United States. But Trump said, look, this is a European affair. It's up to the Europeans to provide the guarantee security-wise to the Ukrainians. Has been some back and forth negotiations. How does Ukraine play into the U.S.-Russian talks in all this? Does Russia oppose a potential U.S.-Ukraine deal? What is Moscow's position in all this?
Yeah, so first of all, as they've occurred so far, they are Russian U.S. diplomatic talks on restoring diplomatic relations. Ukraine doesn't factor into them at all. These are bilateral talks that have really nothing to do with Ukraine thus far. Ukraine may object to the fact that the U.S. is restoring diplomatic relations to the United States. The Kyiv regime in Ukraine does. But they don't really have a say. I don't think Russia really takes seriously or understands the purpose of this theater, this circus around rare earths, particularly as they well know that most of the principal sources of rare earths and other valuable minerals in Ukraine, estimated Forbes up to 70% of them in Ukraine, are already in territory controlled by them, not by the Kyiv regime. I think they're looking on this as with a bit of amusement and watching Ukrainian Kiev regime U.S. relations suffer immensely over this process of Trump's show trying to, I believe, to hoke the Kiev regime into a kind of televised submission on the issue to assert who is the alpha dog in the relationship going forward.
Interesting take. Professor Zhang Xin in Shanghai, let me ask you, what do you expect to come out of the summit between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Donald Trump in the White House, which is scheduled to take place on Friday, that is about 24 hours or so from now?
It looks like very likely there will be some agreement on the mineral deal, although the details are still being finalized. And as we say, the devil is in the details. So we need to look at the details of the final deal to make an assessment of the nature of such a mineral deal. Secondly, as you and the other guest have already brought up, is the so-called security, right? The mineral deals, what is in the exchange, what Ukraine is going to receive as a result of giving up some of its sovereign control of its natural resources. That one, it seems President Zelenskyy and the current Ukrainian government and the Trump administration are not exactly on the same page yet. We have seen very clear sign President Zelenskyy and his team are really wavering to what extent is going to accept the fact that they might lose the control of mineral resources without receiving the kind of reasonable security guarantee from the United States. The United States seem to be more interested in getting the resources, but without providing any credible security guarantee. As we already touched on it, U.S. message is this is the European issue. Go to European countries for the security guarantee. So I think those are the two things I would look for.
Yeah, that is exactly the point, Professor Zhang. Donald Trump asked for something like a $15 billion deal from Ukraine's mineral resources. But the Ukrainians said, look, the U.S. aid, because Trump said in doing this, the Ukrainians are basically reimbursing the U.S. aid to Ukraine for the past 3 years of war, of conflicts, the U.S. weaponry that is provided to the Ukrainian side. But Zelenskyy said, look, the U.S. aid is not even worth $50 million. It's around $10 to $20 million. And like you said, Ukraine insisted on a U.S. commitment to Ukraine security-wise. What kind of security guarantee can Donald Trump give to Zelenskyy, in your opinion?
Well, in theory, if the Trump administration is willing to provide a full-scale security guarantee, there are multiple options. Ukraine is mostly interested in the NATO membership, which seem to be off the table right now. And then another possibility is, of course, security guarantee together with selected countries, not necessarily through NATO, but through a selected country, what I might call a international consortium with the United States involved in some way. This idea has been floating around since the early of the conflict, right? I think President Zelenskyy seemed to be interested in that. I don't know whether the United States is willing to do that at the right moment, but that's another theoretical possibility.
Sure. Mark, you're smiling. What is a more likely scenario when it comes to American, security commitment, if any, to Ukraine?
Yeah, everything we've heard so far from the Trump administration is they have no intention of providing any security guarantees whatsoever to the Kiev regime in Ukraine. In fact, everything says that they're trying to get out of the situation. They're trying to de-escalate at least the U.S. role in this conflict. So here is what the Kiev regime is doing. They are essentially accepting this extortionist colonialist deal on the hopes that simply by giving the U.S. an interest in a monetary interest, supposedly close to Donald Trump's heart in Ukraine, that the U.S. will de facto get roped into some type of security guarantee in the future. This evidently is what the Europeans have convinced Zelenskyy into signing this document. He was at first opposed to it, and supposedly Boris Johnson had a conversation that convinced him that they want to get them roped in. Now, what the Europeans want is they want, particularly the United Kingdom and France, they want to put 30,000 troops on the ground in Ukraine as quote unquote peacekeepers, or the new woke term is reassurance force, right? Well behind the lines. A de facto NATO occupation of Ukraine. But once a ceasefire takes place, and they expect the U.S. to provide a military backstop to their forces, air defense, possibly air security, intelligence, logistics, and the like. Now, there's no indication that the U.S. is willing or interested in providing this any further at all, because they must be aware that this is a blatant attempt to try to rope them back into the conflict and potentially into a direct conflict with Russia. No one is even talking to the Russians on this, which they've made clear again and again and again, that they have no interest in a ceasefire whatsoever until there's a final settlement that addresses the root causes of the conflict, and that not now and not ever will any NATO member state troops on the ground in Ukraine be acceptable to them. They will simply be considered targets. So this is all really a moot point. This is Western countries talking to each other about fictional scenarios that aren't going to happen anyway.
Yeah. Professor Zhang Xin, we have about a minute and a half left. What are China's stakes in all this? President Xi had a phone call with President Putin. Ukraine is a strong partner of China trade-wise. Russia is a collaborative all-weather partnership as well. What will China do?
Well, it's in a very delicate position right now. The readout you just mentioned between President Xi and Putin 3 days ago, part of it is Russia's assurance message to assure its Chinese partners that anything happen between the United States and Russia won't affect Russia relation with China. And also another big challenge for China is all these basic proposals of all countries' sovereignty, territorial integrity need to be respected. All countries' reasonable security concerns need to be respected. That's really universal. I think it goes really well for all parties concerned on an international level. But now it's the real challenge is these security concerns or sovereignty claims in this specific context are conflicting with each other. Russia's claim, security concern claim, conflict with Ukraine's security concern claim, or even part of a European security claim for security concern. Now this is a really big diplomatic challenge. Whether China can play a mediation role or at least convince the parties to sit down in a negotiation table. I'm not convinced. It's a big diplomatic challenge.
All right, a fine line that China is walking right now. Professor Zhang Xin, Mark, thank you both so very much. That's all the time we have for this episode. And now, as the Russia-Ukraine conflict continues, the humanitarian situation on the ground remains dire. Up next is my conversation with Elizabeth Hasland, UNHCR spokesperson in Ukraine. Stay tuned.